fit properly.
You okay, baby?
Yeah, I just can't get it to fit.
What to fit?
My radio harness.
Okay, everyone. We'll be doing a book called Interview with the Vampire, a novel by Anne Rice.
I didn't realize you were doing a video.
No, it's okay, baby. I want to thank my mom, Bobby, for buying this book for me. I have seen bits and pieces of the clips for this particular book. The movie or some of the shows or TV shows called Interview with the Vampire. It seems good to me. So, ow. Okay. This is book 1 of the Vampire Chronicles. Part 1. I see, said the vampire thoughtfully, and slowly he walked across the room towards the window. For a long time he stood there against the dim light from the Visiorado Street and the passing beams of traffic. The boy could see the furnishings of the room more clearly now. The round oak table, the chairs, a wash basin hung on one wall with a mirror. He set his briefcase on the table and waited. About how much tape do you have with you? Asked the vampire, turning now so the boy could see his profile. Enough for the story of a life. Sure, if it's a good life. Sometimes I interview as many as 3 or 4 people a night if I'm lucky, but it has to be a good story. That's only fair, isn't it? Abominably fair, the vampire answered. I would like to tell you the story of my life then. I would like to do that very much. Great, said the boy, and quickly he removed the small tape recorder from his briefcase, making a check of the cassette and the batteries. I'm really anxious to hear what you have to why you believe this, why you know, said the vampire abruptly. We can't begin that way. Is your equipment ready? Yes, said the boy. Then sit down. I am going to turn on the overhead light. But I thought vampires didn't like that, said the boy. We think the dark adds to the atmosphere. But then he stopped. The vampire was watching him with his back to the window. The boy could make out nothing of his face now, and something about the still figure there distracted him. He started to say something again, but he said nothing. But then he sighed with relief when the vampire moved toward the table and reached for the overhead cord. At once the room was flooded with a harsh yellow light, and the boy, staring up at the vampire, could not repress a gasp. His fingers danced backwards on the table to grasp that. Dear God, he whispered, and then he gazed speechless at the vampire. The vampire was utterly white and smooth, as if he were sculpted from bleached bone, and his face was seemingly inanimate as a statue, except for 2 brilliant green eyes that looked down at the boy intently, like flames in a skull.
My knees just hurting.
It's okay, but then the vampire smile almost thoughtfully, and the smooth white substance of his face moved with the
Spell the word, baby. Not
INFINITELY.
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 In other words, never running out or
Flexibly.
going on forever.
Flexibly, but minimal lines of a cartoon. Do you see? He asked softly. The boy shuddered, lifting his hands as if to shield himself from a powerful light. His eyes moved slowly over the finely tailored black coat he only glimpsed in the bar, the long folds of the cape, the black silk he knotted at the throat, and the gleam of the white collar that was as white as the vampire's flesh. He stared at the vampire's full black hair, the waves that were combed back over the tips of the ears, the curls that barely touched the edge of the white collar. Now, do you still want the interview? The vampire asked. The boy's mouth was open before the sound came out. He was nodding. Then he said, yes. The vampire sat down slowly opposite him and leaning forward and said gently, confidently, don't be afraid, just start the tape. He then reached out over the length of the table. The boy recoiled, sweat running down the sides of his face. The vampire clamped a hand on the boy's shoulder and said, believe me, I won't hurt you. I want this opportunity. It's more important to me than you can realize now. I want you to begin. And he withdrew his hand and sat collected, waiting. It took a moment for the boy to wipe his forehead and his lips with a handkerchief to stammer that the microphone was in the machine, to press the button to say that the machine was on. You weren't always a vampire, were you?
Like I said.
Vampire, he began. No, answered the vampire. I was a 25-year-old man when I became a vampire, and the year was 1791. The boy was startled by the preciseness of the date, and he repeated it back before he asked, how did it become that? There's a simple answer to that. I don't believe I want to give simple answers, said the vampire. I think I want to tell you the real story. Yes, the boy said quickly. He was folding his handkerchief over and over, wiping his lips now with it again. There was a tragedy, the vampire started. It was my younger brother. He died. He then stopped so that the boy cleared his throat and wiped up his face again before stuffing the handkerchief and was impatiently into his pocket. It's not painful, is it? He asked timidly. Does it seem so? Does it seem so? Asked the vampire. No, he shook his head. It's simply that I've only been told this story to one other person. And that was so long ago. No, it's not painful. We were living in Louisiana then. We received a land grant and settled to indigo plantations on the Mississippi River, very near New Orleans. And that's the accident. And that's the accent, the boy said softly. For a moment, the vampire staring. I have an accent. He began to lie, and the boy flustered answered quickly. I noticed it in the bar when I asked you what you did for a living. It's just a slight sharpness to the consonant consonants, that's all. I never guessed it was French. It's alright, the vampire assured him. I'm not as shocked as I pretend to be. It's only that I forget it from time to time, but please let me go on. Please, said the boy. I was talking about the plantations. They had a great deal to do with it. Really, becoming a vampire, but I'll come to that. Our life there was both luxurious and primitive, and we ourselves found it extremely attractive. You see, we lived far better than there than we could have ever lived in France. Perhaps the sheer wilderness of Louisiana only made it seem so, but seeming so, it was. I remember the important furniture that cluttered the house, the vampire smiled, and the harpsichord, that was lovely. My sister used to play it. On summer evenings, she would sit at the keys with her back to the open French windows, and I can still remember that then rapid music and the vision of the swamp rising beyond her, the moss-hanging cypress floating against the sky. And there were the sounds of the swamp, a chorus of creatures, the cries of the birds. I think we loved it. It made the rosewood furniture all the more precious, the music more delicate and desirable, even when the whisperer tore the shutters off the attic windows and worked its ginger's right into the whitewashed brick in less than a year. Yes, we loved it, all except my brother. I don't think I ever heard him complain of anything, but I knew how he felt. My father was dead then. I was head of the house, and I had to defend him constantly from my mother and sister. They wanted to take him visiting into New Orleans for parties, but he hated those things. I think he stopped going altogether before he was 12. Prayer was what mattered to him. Prayer and his leather-bound Lives of the Saints. Finally, I built him an oratory removed from the house, and began to spend most of every day there, and of the early evening. It was ironic, really. He was so different from us, so different from everyone. I was so irregular. There was nothing extraordinary about me whatsoever. The vampire smiled. Sometimes in the evening, I would go out to him and find him in the garden near the oratory, sitting absolutely composed on a stone bench there, and I tell him my troubles, the difficulties I had with the slaves, how I distrusted the overseer, or the weather, or my brokers, all the problems that made up the length and beneath of my existence. He would listen, making only a few comments, always sympathetic, so that when I left him, I had the distant impression he had solved everything for me. I didn't think I could deny him anything. I vow that no matter how I would break my heart to lose him, he could enter the priesthood when the time came. Of course, I was wrong. The vampire stopped. For a moment, the boy only gazed at him, and then he started as if awakening from the deep thought, and he floundered as if he could not find the right words. He didn't want to be a priest, the boy asked. The vampire studied him as if trying to discern the meaning of his expression. Then he said, I meant that I was wrong about myself, about my not denying him anything. His eyes moved over the far wall and fixed on the panes of the window. he began to see visions. Real visions, the boy asked. But again, there was his station, as if he were thinking of something else. I didn't think so, the vampire answered. It happened when he was 15. He was very handsome then. He had the smoothest skin and the largest blue eyes. He was robust, not thin, as I am now, and then it was then, but his eyes, it was as if when I looked into his eyes, I was standing alone on the edge of the world, on a windswept ocean beach. There was nothing but the soft roar of the waves. Well, he said, his eyes fixed on the window panes. He began to see visions. He only hinted at it at first, and he stopped taking his meals altogether. He lived in the ordinary. At any hour of the day or night, I could find him on the bare flagstones, kneeling before the altar, and the alternary itself was neglected. He stopped tending the candles, or cleaning the altar cloths, or even sweeping out the leaves. One night I became really alarmed when I stood in the rows above, watching him for 1 solid hour, during which he never moved from his knees, and that he never once lowered his arms, which he held outstretched in the form of a cross. The slaves all thought he was mad. The vampire raised his eyebrows in wonder. I was convinced that he was only overzealous, that in his love for God he had perhaps gone too far. Then he told me about the visions. Both Saint Dominic and the Blessed Virgin Mary had come to him in the ordinary. They had told him he was to sell all our property in Louisiana, everything we owned, and use the money to do God's work in France. My brother was to be a great religious leader, to return to the country to its former to turn the tide against atheism and the revolution. Of course, he had no money of his own. I was to sell the plantation and our town houses in New Orleans and give him money to him. Again, the vampire stopped, and the boy sat motionless, regarding him, astonished. Excuse me, he whispered. What did you say? Did you say at the plantation? No, said the vampire, his face calm, as it had been from the start. I laughed at him, and he became insistent. He insisted his command came from the Virgin herself. Who was I to disregard it? Who indeed? He asked softly, as if he were thinking of this again. Who indeed? And the more he tried to convince me, the more I laughed. It was nonsense. I told him the product of an immature and even morbid mind. The archery was a mistake, I said to him. I would have it torn down at once. He would go to school in New Orleans and get such inane notions out of his head. I don't remember all that I said, but I remember the feeling. Behind all this tempestuous dismissal on my part was a smoldering anger and disappointment. I was bitterly disappointed. I didn't believe him at all. That's understandable, said the boy quickly, and the vampire paused, his expression of astonishment softening. I mean, why would anyone have believed him? It is so understandable. The vampire looked at the boy. I think perhaps it was so various and egotistic. Let me explain. I love my brother, as I told you, and at times I believe him to be a living saint. I encouraged him in his prayer and meditations, as I said, and I was willing to give him up to the priesthood. And if someone had told me of a saint in Orleans or Lourdes who saw visions, I would have believed it. I was a Catholic. I believe in saints. I lit tapers before their marble statues in churches. I knew their pictures, the symbols, the names. But I didn't. Couldn't believe my brother. Not only did I not believe he saw visions, I couldn't entertain the notion for a moment. Now why? Because he was my brother. Holy, he might be peculiar, most definitely, but Francis of Assisi, no, but not my brother. No brother of mine could be such. That is egotism. Do you see, the boy thought about it before he answered, and then he nodded, and then said yes, he thought that he did. Perhaps he saw the visions, said the vampires. Then you don't claim to know now whether he did or not? No. But I do know that he never wavered in the conviction for a second. That I know now, and knew that the night he left my room crazed and grieved, he never wavered for an instant, and within minutes he was dead. How? The boy asked. He simply walked out of the front doors onto the gallery and stood for a moment at the head of the brick stairs, and then he fell. He was dead, and I reached the bottom, his neck broken. The vampire shook his head in consternation, but his face was still serene. Did you see him fall? He asked the boy. Did he lose his footing? No. But the two of the servants saw it happen. They said that he had looked up as if he had seen something in the air. Then his tired body moved forward as if being swept by a wind. One of them said he was about to say something when he fell. I thought that he was about to say something too, but it was at that moment I turned away from the window. My back was turned when I heard the noise. He glanced at the tape recorder. I could not forgive myself. I felt responsible for his death, he said. And everyone else seemed to think I was responsible also. But how could they? You said they saw him fall. It wasn't a direct accusation. They simply knew that something had passed between us that was unpleasant. That we had argued minutes before the fall. The servants had heard us. My mother had heard us. My mother would not stop asking me what had happened and why my brother, who was so quiet, had been shouting. Then my sister joined in, and of course I refused to say. I was so bitterly shocked and miserable that I had no patience with anyone, only the vague determination they would not know about his visions. They would not know about what he had become. Finally, not a saint, but only a fanatic. My sister went to bed rather than face the funeral, and my mother told everyone in the parish that something horrible happened in my room which I would not reveal. Even the police questioned me on the word of my own mother. Finally, the priest came to see me and demanded to know what had gone on. I told no one. It was only a discussion, I said. I was not told to the gallery. I was not on the gallery when he fell, I protested, and they all stared at me as if I killed him. And I felt that I killed him. I sat in the parlor beside his coffin for 2 days thinking I had killed him. I stared at his face until spots appeared before my eyes and I nearly faded. The back of his skull had been shattered on the pavement and his head had the wrong shape on the pillow. I forced myself to stare at it, to study it simply because I could hardly endure the pain and the smell of decay, and I was tempted over and over to try and open his eyes. All these were mad thoughts, mad impulses. The main thought was this: I had laughed at him. I had not believed him. I had not been kind to him. He had fallen because of me. This really happened, didn't it? The boy whispered. You telling me something that's true? Yes, said the vampire. Looking at him without surprise, I want to go on telling you. But as his eyes passed over the boy and returned to the window, he showed only faint interest in the boy, who seemed engaged in some silent inner struggle. But you said you didn't know about the visions, that you, a vampire, didn't know for certain whether I'd want to take things in order, said the vampire. I want to go on telling you things as they happen. No, I don't know about the vengeance to this day. And again he waited until the boy said, yes, please go on. Well, I wanted to sell the plantations. I never wanted to see the house on the artery again. At least them finally to an agency which would work them for me and manage things, so I need never go there. And I moved my mother and sister to one of the townhouses in New Orleans. Of course, I did not escape my brother for a moment. I could think of nothing but his body rotting in the ground. It was buried in the St. Louis Cemetery in New Orleans. I did everything to avoid passing those gates, but still I thought of him constantly, drunk or sober. I saw his body rotting in the coffin, and I couldn't bear it. Over and over I dreamed that he was at the head of the stairs and I was holding his arms, talking kindly to him, urging him back into the bedroom, telling him gently that I did believe him, that he must pray for me to have faith. Meanwhile, the slaves on Point du Lac, that was my plantation, that began to talk of seeing his ghost on the gallery. And the overseer couldn't keep order. People in society asked my sister offensive questions about the whole incident, and she became hysterical. She wasn't really in hysteric. She simply thought she ought to react that way, so she did. I drank all the time and was at home as little as possible. I lived like a man who wanted to die, but who had no courage to do it himself. I walked black streets and alleys alone. I passed out in cabernets. I backed out of two doors more than apathy than cowards and truly wished to be murdered. And then I was attacked. It might have been anyone, and my invitation was open to sailors, thieves, maniacs, anyone, but it was a vampire. He caught me just a few steps from my door one night, and he left me for dead, or so I thought. You mean he sucked your blood? The boy asked. Yes, the vampire said. He sucked my blood. That is the way it's done, but you live, the young man said. He said he left you for dead. Well, he drained me almost to the point of death, which was for him significant. I was put to bed as soon as I was found, confused and really unaware of what had happened to me. I suppose I thought that drink had finally caused a stroke. I expected to die now and had no intense interest in eating or drinking or talking to the doctor. My mother sent for the priest. I was feverish by then, and I told the priest everything, all about my brother's visions and what I had done. I remember I clung to his arm, making him swear over and over he would tell no one. I know I didn't kill him, I said to the priest finally. It's that I cannot live now that he's dead. Not after the way I treated him. That's ridiculous, he answered me. Of course you can live. There is nothing wrong with you but self-indulgence. Your mother needs you, not to mention your sister. And as for this brother of yours, he was possessed of the devil. I was so stunned when he said that I couldn't protest. The devil made the visions. He went on to explain the devil was rampant. The entire country of France was under the influence of the devil, and the revolution had been his greatest triumph. Nothing would have saved my brother but exorcism, prayer, and fasting men to hold him down while the devil raged in his body and tried to throw him about. The devil threw him down the steps. It's perfectly obvious, he declared. You weren't talking to your brother in that bedroom. You were talking to the devil. Well, this enraged me. I believe before that I had been pushed to my limits, but I had not. He went on talking about the devil, about voodoo amongst the slaves in cases of possession in other parts of the world, and I went wild. I wrecked the room in the process of nearly killing him. But your strength, the vampire, he asked the boy. I was out of my mind, the vampire exclaimed. I did things I could not have done in perfect health. The scene is confused, pale, fantastical now. But I do remember that I drove him out of the back doors of the house, across the courtyard, and against the brick wall of the kitchen, where I pounded his head until I nearly killed him. When I was subdued, finally, and exhausted, then almost to the point of death, they bled me. The fools. But I was going to say something else. It was then that I convinced of my own egoism. Perhaps I've seen it reflect in the priest. His contemptuous attitude toward my brother reflected my own. His intimate and shadow carping about the devil, his refusal to even entertain the idea that sanity had passed to close. But did he believe in possession by the devil? That is much more mundane idea, said the vampire immediately. People who cease to believe in God or goodness altogether still believe in the devil. I don't know why. No, I do indeed know why. Evil is always possible, and goodness is internally difficult. But you must understand, possession is really another way of saying someone is mad. I felt it was, for the priest. I'm sure he seen madness. Perhaps he had stood right over Raven madness and pronounced it possession. You don't have to see Satan when he is exorcised, but to stand in the presence of a saint, to believe that the saint has been seen a vision, knows its egotism. Our refusal to believe it could occur in our mindset. I never thought of it in that way, said the boy, but what happened to you? You said they bled you to cure you, and that must have nearly killed you. The vampire laughed. Yes, it certainly did, but the vampire came back that night. You see, he wanted Point du Lac, my plantation. It was very late after my sister had fallen asleep. I can remember it as it was yesterday. He came in from the courtyard, opening the French doors without a sound. A tall, fair-skinned man with a mass of blonde hair and a graceful, almost feline qualities to his movements, and gently he draped a shawl over my sister's eyes and lowered the wick of the lamp. She dozed there beside the basin and the cloth with which she bathed my forehead, and she never once stirred under that shawl until morning. But by that time I was greatly changed. What was this change? Asked the boy. The vampire sighed. He leaned against the chair and looked at the walls. At first I thought he was another doctor or someone summoned by the family to try to reason with me, but this suspicion was removed at once. He stepped closer to my bed and leaned down so that his face was in the lamplight, and I saw that he was no ordinary man at all. Ordinary man at all. His gray eyes burned with an incandescence, and the long white hand which hung by his sides were not those of a human being. I think I knew everything in that instant, and all that he told me was aftermath. What I mean is, the moment I saw his extraordinary aura, and knew him to be no creature I ever known, I was reduced to nothing. That ego which would not accept presence of an extraordinary human being in its midst was crushed. All my conceptions, even my guilt and wish to die, seemed utterly unimportant. I completely forgot myself, he said, now silently touching his breast with his fist. I forgot myself totally, and in the same instant knew totally the meaning of possibility. From then on, I experienced only increasing wonder as he talked to me and told me of what I might become, of what his life had been and stood to be. My past shrank to embers. I saw my life as if I stood apart from it. The vanity, the self-serving, the constant fleeting from the one petty annoyance after another, the lip service to God and the Virgin, and a host of saints whose names filled my prayer books, none of whom made the slightest difference in a narrow, materialistic, and selfish existence. I saw my real gods, the gods of most men: food, drink, insecurity, and conformity cinders. The boy's face was tense with a mixture of confusion and amazement. And so you decided to become a vampire, he asked. The vampire was silent for a moment. Decided? It doesn't seem to be the right word, yet I cannot say it was inevitable from the moment that he stepped into that room. No, indeed it was not inevitable. Yet I cannot say I decided. Let me say that when he finished speaking, no other decision was possible for me. I pursued my course without a backward glance except for one. Except for one what? My last sunrise, said the vampire. That morning I was not yet a vampire, and I saw my last sunrise. I remember it completely, yet I do not think I remember any other sunrise before it. I remember the light came in first to the tops of the French windows, a paling behind the lace curtains, and then a gleam growing brighter and brighter in patches among the leaves of the trees. Finally the sun came through the windows themselves, and the lace lay in the shadows on the stone floor. and all over the form of my sister, who was still sleeping, shadows of lace of the shawl over her shoulders and her head. As soon as she was warm, she pushed the shawl away without awakening. And then the sun shone full on her eyes, and she tightened her eyelids. Then it was gleaming on the other table where she rested her head on her arms, and gleaming, blazing in the water in the pitcher. And I could feel it on my hands, on the counterpane, and then on my face. I lay in the bed thinking about all the things the vampire had told me, and then it was that I said goodbye to the sunrise and went to become a vampire. It was the last sunrise. The vampire was looking out the window again, and then he stopped. The silence was so sudden the boy seemed to hear it. Then he could hear the noise from the street. The sound of a truck was the fanning. The light car stirred with vibration. Then the truck was gone. Do you miss it? He asked, and then in a small voice, no, not really, said the vampire. There were many other things, but where were we? You want to know how it happened? How I became a vampire? Yes, said the boy. How did you change exactly? I can't tell you how exactly, said the vampire. I can tell you about it and close it with words that will make the value of it to me evident to you. But I cannot tell you exactly any more than I could tell you exactly what is experience of sex if you had never heard of it, if you have never had it. The young man seemed struck suddenly with still another question, but before he could speak, the vampire went on. As I told you, this vampire Lestat wanted the plantation, a mundane reason, surely for granting me a life which would last until the end of the world, but he was not really a very discriminating person. He didn't consider the world's small population of vampires as being a select club, I should say. He had human problems. A blind father who had not known his son was a vampire and must not find out. Living in New Orleans had become too difficult for him, considering his needs and the necessity to care for his father. He wanted Point du Lac. We went at once to the plantation the next evening, escorting the blind father in the master bedroom, and I proceeded to make the change. I cannot say that it was consistent in any one step really. The one of course was the step beyond which I could not make no return. There were several acts involved, and the first was the death of the overseer. Lestat took him in his sleep. I was to watch and to prove that is, to witness the taking of a human life as proof of my commitment and part of my change. This proved without doubt the most difficult part of me. I have told you I have no fear regarding my own death, only a squeamish about taking my life myself. But I had a most high regard for the life of others, and a horror of death most recently developed because of my brother. I had watched the overseer awake with a start, the throw of Lestat with both hands fail, and then lie there struggling under Lestat's grasp and finally going up, drain of blood, and die. He did not die at once. We stood in his narrow bedroom for the better part of an hour watching him die. Part of my change, as I said, Lestat would have never stayed stayed otherwise, then it was necessary to get rid of the overseer's body. I was almost sick from this. Weak and feverish already, I had little reserve, and handling the dead body with such a purpose caused me nausea. Lestat was laughing, telling me Callius that I would feel so different once I was a vampire that I would laugh too. He was wrong about that. I never laughed at death, no matter how often and regularly I am the cause of it. But let me take things in order. We had to drive up the river road until we came to open fields and leave the overseer there. We tore his coat, stole his money, and saw it to his lips were stained with liquor. I knew his wife, who lived in New Orleans, and knew the state of the desperation she would suffer when the body was discovered. But more than sorrow for her, I felt pain that she would never know that what had happened, that her husband was not been found drunk on the road by robbers. We beat the body, bruising the face and the shoulders. I became more and more aroused. Of course, you must realize that all this time the vampire Lestat was extraordinary. He was no more human to me than a biblical angel. But under this pressure, my enhancement with him was stirring. I had seen my becoming a vampire in two lights. The first light was simply enhancement. Lestat had overwhelmed me on my deathbed, but the other light was my wish for self-destruction. My desire to be thoroughly damned. This was the open door through which Lestat had come on both the first and second occasions. Now I was not destroying myself, but someone else. The overseer, his wife, his family. I reconciled and might have fled from Lestat, my insanity, thoroughly shattered, had he not sent with an infallibility. Yeah, infallibility.
Wait, spell that.
INFALLIBLE.
Yeah, that's infallibility.
Insist that what was happening
Infallibility, baby.
Instant the vampire mused. Let me say the powerful instinct of a vampire to whom even the slightest change in a human facial expression is as apparent as a gesture. Lestat had predetermined.
Spell the word out.
PRETERNAT.
Say that again.
URAL.
I never heard that word before.
Timing. He rushed me into the carriage and whipped the horses home. I want to die, I began to murmur. This is unbearable. I want to die. You have it in your power to kill me. Let me die. I refuse to look at him, to be spellbound by the sheer beauty of his appearance. He spoke my name to me softly, laughing. As I said, he was determined to have the plantation. But what would he have let you go? Asked the boy. Under any circumstances. I don't know. Knowing Lestat as I do now, I would say he would have killed me rather than let me go. But this was what I wanted, you see. It didn't matter. No This was what I thought I wanted. As soon as we reached the house, I jumped down out of the carriage and walked a zombie to the brick stairs where my brother had fallen. The house had been unoccupied for months. The overseer had having his own cottage. The Louisiana heat and damp were already picking apart the steps. Every crevice was sprouting grass, and every small wildflowers. I remember feeling the moisture, which in the night it was cool as I sat down on the lower steps and even rested my head against the brick, and I felt the little wax down wildflowers with my hands. I pulled a clump of them out of the easy dirt in one hand. I want to die. Kill me, I said to the vampire. Now I'm guilty of murder. I cannot live. He sneered with the impatience of people listening to the obvious lies of others. And then in a flash, he fastened on me as he had on my man. I thrust against him wildly. I dug my boot into his chest and kicked him as fiercely as I could. His teeth stinging my throat, the fever pounding in my temples, and with a movement of his entire body, much too fast for me to see, he was suddenly standing drainfully at the foot of the stairs. I thought you wanted to die, Louis, he said. Louis. The boy made a soft, abrupt sound when the vampire said his name, which the vampire acknowledged with a quick nod. Yes, that is my name, and went on. While I lay there helpless in the face of my own cowardice and fatuous again, he said. Perhaps so directly confronted with it as might in time have gained the courage to truly to take my life, not to whine and beg for others to take it. I saw myself turning on a knife, then languishing in a day-to-day suffering which I found a necessary aspirant from the confusion, truly hoping death would find me unaware and render me fit for eternal pardon. And also I saw myself as if in a vision, standing at the head of the stairs, just where my brother had stood, and then hurling my body down the bricks. But there was no time for courage, or should I say there was no time in Lester's plan for anything but his plan. Now listen to me, Louis, he said, and he lay down beside me, now on the steps, his movement so graceful and so personal that at once he made me think of a lover, a reconciled, but he put his right arm around me and pulled me close to his chest. Never had I been this close to him before, and in the dim light I could see the magnificent radiance of his eyes and the unnatural mask of his skin. As I tried to move, he pressed his fingers against my lips and said, "Be still. I am going to drain you now to the very threshold of death, and I want you to be quiet, so quiet that you can almost hear the flow of blood through your veins, so quiet that you can hear the flow of that same blood through mine. It is your consequences, your will, which must keep you alive." I wanted to struggle. He pressed so hard with his fingers that he my entire prone body in check. And as soon as I stopped my abrupt attempt at rebellion, he sank his teeth into my neck. The boy's eyes grew huge. He had drawn farther and farther back in the chair as the vampire spoke, and now his face was tense, his eyes narrow, as if he were preparing to weather a blow. Have you ever lost a great amount of blood? Asked the vampire. Do you know the feeling? The boy's lips shaped the word no, but no sound came out. He cleared his throat. No, he said. Candles burned in the upstairs parlor where we had planned the death of the overseer. An oil lantern swayed in the breeze on a gallery. All of this light swelled and began to shimmer, as though a golden presence hovered above me, suspended in the stairway, softly guarded with the railing, curling and constructing like smoke. Listen, keep your eyes wide, Les whispered to me, his eyes moving against my neck. I remembered that at that moment of his lips raised the hair all over my body, sent a shock of sensation through my body that was not unlike the pleasance of passion. He mused, his right fingers slightly curled beneath his chin, the first finger appearing to lightly stroke it. The result was that within minutes I was weak to paralyzed, panic-stricken. I discovered I could not even with myself to speak. Les still held me, of course, in his arm, in all the weight of an iron bar. I felt his teeth withdraw with such keenness that the two punctured wounds seemed enormous, lined with pain. And now he bent over my helpless head, taking his right hand off me, bit his own wrist. The blood flowed down upon my shirt and coat, then he watched it with a narrow, gleaming eye. It seemed an eternity that he watched it, that the shimmering of light hung behind his head like the backdrop of an apparition. I think that I knew what he meant to do before he even did it. I was waiting in my helplessness as I've been waiting for years. He pressed his bleeding wrist to my mouth and firmly said impatiently, Louis, drink. And I did. Steady, Louis, and hurry, he whispered to me a number of times. I drank, sucking the blood out of the hose, experiencing for the first time since infancy the special pleasure of sucking nourishment. The body
Reminds me of Carlisle and Edward from Twilight.
focused with the mind upon one vital source. Then something happened. The vampire sat back, a slight frown on his face. How pathetic it is to describe these things which can't truly be described. His voice in a low, almost to a whisper. The boy sat as if frozen. I saw nothing but the light. Then I saw, as I drew blood, and then the next thing was sound. A dull roar at first, then a pounding like the pounding of a drum, growing louder and louder, as if some enormous creature were coming.
Oh, I'm sorry, baby. I'm getting a spasm in my side. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Up on one, slowly through a dark and alien forest, pounding as he came. a huge drum. And then there came the pounding of another drum, as if another giant were coming yards behind him, and each giant, intent on his own drum, gave no notice to the rhythm of the other. The sound grew louder and louder until it seemed to fill not only just my hearing, but all my senses, to be throbbing in my lips and fingers, in the flesh, in my temples, in my veins. Above all, in my veins, drum, and then the other drum, and then Lestat pulled his wrist free suddenly, and I opened my eyes, checked myself in a moment of reaching for his wrist, grabbing it and forcing it back to my mouth as it all cost. I checked myself because I realized that the drum was my heart, and the second drum had been his, the vampire side. Do you understand? The boy began to speak. And then he shook his head. No, I mean, I do. And then he said, of course, said the vampire, looking away. Wait, said the boy in a weather of excitement. The tape is almost gone. I have to turn it over. The vampire watched precisely as he changed it. What happened then? The boy asked. His face was moist, and he wiped it hurriedly with his handkerchief. I saw as a vampire, said the vampire, his voice now slightly detached. It seemed almost distant, but then he drew himself up. Les was standing again at the foot of the stairs, and I saw him as I could not possibly have seen him before. He had seemed white to me before, sparkly white, so that in the night it was almost luminous. And now I saw him filled with his own life in his own blood, and he was radiant, not luminous. And then I saw that not only Lestat had changed, but all things had changed. It was as if I had only had passed. It was just as if I had only just been able to see color and shapes for the first time. I was so enthralled with the buttons on Lestat's black coat that I looked at nothing else for a long time. Then Lestat began to laugh, and I heard his laughter as I had never heard anything before. His heart I still heard like the beating of a drum. And now came the metallic laughter. It was confusing, each sound running into the next sound, like the mingling reverberations of bells. And I learned to separate the sounds, and then they overlapped, each softer but distant, increasing but discreet pearls of laughter. The vampire smiled with delight. Pearls of bells. Stop looking at my buttons, Lestat said. Go out there into the trees, rid yourself of all the human waste on your body, and don't fall so madly in love with the night that you lose your way. That, of course, was a wise command. When I saw the moon on the flagstones, I became so enthused and along with it that I must have spent an hour there. I passed my brother's artery without so much as a thought of him. And standing among the cottonwood and oaks, I heard the night as if it were the chorus of whispering women, all beckoning me to their breasts. And as for my body, it was not totally yet converted. As soon as I became the least astonished to the sound and sights, it began to ache. All my human fluids were being forced out of me. I was dying as a human, yet completely alive as a vampire, and with my awakened senses, I had to peculiarly preside over the death of my body with a certain discomfort. And then finally, fear. I ran back up the steps to the parlor where Lisa was already at work on the plantation papers, going over the expenses and profits for the last year. "You're a rich man," he said to me when I came in. "Something's happened to me," I shouted. "You're dying, that's all. Don't be a fool. Don't you have any oil lamps? All this money and you can't afford whale oil except for that lantern. Bring me that lantern." "Dying," I shouted. "Dying. It happens to everyone." He proceeded.
You okay?
Yeah. Proceeded, refusing to help me. As I look back on it, I still despise him for it. Not because I was afraid, but because he might have drawn my attention to these changes with vengeance. He might have claimed me and told me I might watch my death with the same fascination with which I had watched and felt that night. But he didn't. Lestat was never the vampire I am, not at all. The vampire did not say this boastfully. He said it as if he would truly had it otherwise. "Otherwise," he sighed, "I was dying fast, which meant that my capacity for fear was diminishing rapidly. I simply regret I was not more attracted to the process. Lestat was being a perfect idiot. Oh, for the love of hell," he began to shout. "Do you realize I made no provision for you? What a fool am I." I was tempted to say, "Yes, you are," but I didn't. "You'll have to bed down with me this morning. I haven't prepared your coffin." The vampire laughed. The coffin struck such a chord of terror in me. I think it's absurd. All the capacity for terror I had left. But then came only my mild alarm at having to share a coffin with Lestat. He was in my father's bedroom meantime, telling the old man goodbye, that he would return in the morning. "But where do you go? Why must you leave by such a schedule?" the old man demanded. Unless I became impatient. Before this, he had on gracious to the old man, and almost to the point of sickening wine. But now he fully became bully. "I take care of you, don't I? I put a better roof over your head than you ever put over mine. If I wanted to sleep all day and drink all night, I'll do it, damn you." The old man started to whine. Only my peculiar state of emotions, the most unusual feeling of feeling exhausted, kept me from disapproving. I was watching the scene through the open door, enthralled with the colors of the counterpane and the positive riot of color in the old man's face. His blue veins pulsed beneath his pink and grayish flesh. I found even the yellow of his teeth appealing to me, and I became almost hypnotized by the quivering of his lips. Such a son," he said, never suspecting, of course, the true nature of his son. "All right, then go. I know you keep a woman somewhere. You go to see her as soon as her husband leaves in the morning. Give me my rosary." "What's happened to my rosary?" The son said something, blessed me, and gave him the rosary. "But," said the boy. "Yes," said the vampire. "I'm afraid I don't allow you to ask enough questions." "I was going to ask, rosaries have crosses on them, don't they?" "Oh, the rumors about crosses," the vampire laughed. "You refer to our being afraid of crows, unable to look at on them, I thought, said the boy. Nonsense, my friend, sheer nonsense. I can look on anything I like. And I rather like looking on crucifixes in particular. And what about the rumor about keyholes that you can become steam and go through 'em? I wish I could, laughed the vampire. How positively delightful. I should like to pass through all manner of different keyholes and feel the tickle of the particular shapes. No, he shook his head. That is, how would you say today? Bullshit. The boy laughed despite himself, then his face grew serious. You mustn't be so shy with me, the vampire said. What is it? The story about stakes through the heart, said the boy. His cheeks coloring slightly the same, said the vampire. Bullshit, he said carefully, arguing both syllables so that the boy smiled. No magical power whatsoever. Why don't you smoke one of your cigars? I see you have them in your pocket. And that's where we're going to be ending for tonight. And I will pick up again another day. I hope you all enjoy Interview with the Vampire.